The splash hit before I could stop myself, amber liquid scattering across polished glass, the sharp scent of whiskey mixing with fear. Every drop seemed to burn the space between us. The entire bar went silent. Ice clinked. Someone gasped. I'd just thrown my drink in the face of Lorenzo DeLuca, the most dangerous man in Chicago. My pulse thudded against my throat like a trapped bird, but I didn't flinch. I stood my ground, trembling and furious, my hand still damp with the echo of the throw. Across from me, the Mafia boss slowly raised his gaze from the dripping edge of his immaculate suit. One eyebrow arched, and then, unbelievably, he smirked. "Now you've got my attention." His voice was low, smooth, and lethal, a slow strike wrapped in silk. Outside, thunder rolled along the skyline, rain streaking the windows of the Velvet Ember bar. Inside, glass caught the city lights, fractured them into gold shards that danced across Lorenzo's face, turning menace into a strange kind of beauty. Behind me, my best friend Emma whimpered, half hidden by our overturned bar stool. This was for her, her trembling hands, her fear when that drunken associate cornered her minutes ago. My throw wasn't bravery, it was reflex. And now, every heartbeat seemed to count down to disaster. The room was split, half of Lorenzo's men at the far side, motionless except for subtle shifts of muscle under their jackets. My co-workers frozen mid-motion, the music still humming faintly in the background as if it was afraid to stop. I could feel the prickle of their eyes on my back. Lorenzo took a slow step forward, wiping his cheek with a folded linen napkin handed, wordlessly, by one of his guards. The movement was precise, elegant, rehearsed. The calm of someone who owned fear the way other men owned cars. His dark hair glistened under the amber lights, the small cut on his cheek from a shard of glass look, and almost deliberate, a mark of something feral. "What's your name?" he asked quietly. The words coiled in the air between us, heavy with warning and curiosity. My throat felt tight, but I answered, "Maya." It came out smaller than I wanted, but steady. "You shouldn't mess with my friends." Something in his expression flickered. Amusement? Intrigue? Then he laughed, a sound soft and dangerous. "Maya," he repeated, tasting the syllables like fine wine. "Interesting choice." He folded the napkin, set it calmly on the counter, and leaned forward just enough for me to see the shadow in his gray-green eyes. "People haven't spoken to me that way in a very long time." The rain intensified outside, streaking the glass like molten silver. Thunder shook the building's bones. I could smell burnt citrus from my spilled cocktail mixing with wet asphalt and perfume. The air hung thick, expectant, alive. I told myself not to shake, not to show him fear. Emma's trembling behind me urged me forward even as logic screamed for retreat. "Clean up the mess," Lorenzo murmured, still watching me. Then, to me alone, "We'll talk soon." He turned, unhurried, and walked out into the rain, his guards flanking him like shadows. Only when the door closed did anyone breathe again. My knees felt weak, and the glass in my hand rattled softly. It wasn't over. It had only just begun. I threw my drink in the Mafia boss's face to defend my best friend. He smirked and said, "Now you've got my attention." Tell me in the comments which country you're listening from and what time it is right now, and don't forget to subscribe for more intense love stories that keep your heart racing till the last second. The next morning, the city smelled like coffee, wet brick, and aftermath. My apartment window rattled in the cold wind bleeding off Lake Michigan. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that smirk, the way his lips had curved, not in fury, but in interest, like I'd handed him a puzzle he couldn't put down. Emma insisted I'd saved her life. I wasn't sure I hadn't ruined mine. The news played softly from the tiny kitchen TV. Tensions rise between rival DeLuca and Moretti families. I turned down the volume. The name DeLuca pulsed under my skin like a bruise. Chicago's tabloids whispered about Lorenzo as if he were some mythic figure carved from sin and charm, a man who handled betrayal the way surgeons handled scalpels, precise, quick, final. I tugged on my cafe uniform, heart racing. Maybe he'd forgotten. Maybe men like him had bigger crimes to deal with than mouthy baristas with bad aim. The Velvet Ember felt different that evening, quieter, cautious. Rain streaked the windows again, thin silver lines against the neon outside. It was the kind of rain that made secrets smell stronger. Emma was arranging glassware with the fragility of someone who expected it all to shatter. "You sure you should be here, Maya?" she whispered. "He could fire me? Own the city?" "Probably both," I muttered. "But we need rent." The bell above the door chimed, and there he was. The air changed, sharp and electric, like the moment before lightning. Lorenzo De Luca stepped through the entrance, his suit cut to perfection, rain sliding off his shoulders as if gravity obeyed him differently. Behind him, the same two suited guards, their eyes scanning, calculating, disinterested in everyone but him. The chatter died instantly. Emma's hand froze mid-polish. Lorenzo's gaze slid over the room, bypassing nervous patrons, unbothered by the waitstaff scuttling toward the kitchen. Then those storm-gray eyes found me. He smiled, not the polite social kind, but something deeper, edged with memory. "Miss Maya," he said softly, strolling forward. "You cost me a very fine whiskey." My pulse jumped. I managed, "Send me the bill." The words surprised even me. A flash of courage or idiocy, I wasn't sure. His laugh was quiet but genuine, the sound curling in my stomach. "Oh, I think you'll repay it. Differently." He stopped at the bar, fingers resting on the counter near mine. Up close, he smelled of leather, cedar, and rain. "You have remarkable aim, by the way." My mouth went dry. Before I could respond, he slid a small white envelope across the bar. Unmarked. Heavy. "For you." Inside was no money, just a black card embossed with silver lettering. De Luca Holdings, private address, 8 p.m. Tomorrow. "Why?" I whispered. "Because curiosity," Lorenzo murmured, "is a dangerous thing, and you've made me curious." He straightened, that half-smile still haunting his face. "Don't be late." Then he walked out again, leaving the scent of his cologne and a silence that felt like a fuse burning towards something unstoppable. I stared down at the card, rain running in rivulets down the bar's glass surface, blurring the silver letters. Tomorrow, 8 p.m. My life had just been rewritten. The card waited on my nightstand all day like a dare. By dusk, the sky turned the same bruised purple as ink bleeding through paper. Every raindrop against my window felt like a countdown. I'd spent 12 hours arguing with myself, every reasonable part of my brain screaming, "Do not go," every reckless spark whispering, "But what if?" When I finally stepped outside, the rain was gentle and persistent, coating the city in a mirrored sheen. Streetlights shimmered across puddles, taxi tires hissed along the asphalt. I wore my best black dress, cheap fabric but iron-pressed to perfection, and clutched my thrift store umbrella like armor. The Uber driver barely spoke. What could I even tell him? "Take me to a criminal's mansion, please. I'm dying to make worse choices." The address led to Lakeview Heights, where old money sat behind wrought iron gates and manicured hedges that glistened under security lights. The De Luca estate rose from the mist, dark stone, arched windows glowing gold, vines creeping like veins up its facade. The gates opened without a word from me, as if the house itself had been expecting this mistake. Inside, the air smelled of rain-damp roses, polished marble, and something faintly smoky. A butler in crisp gray guided me through a hall of mirrors and portraits. Hard-eyed men in tailored suits, women with diamond smiles and dangerous secrets. The whole place felt suspended in another world, one built from wealth, blood, and restraint. Lorenzo was waiting in a library large enough to swallow my entire apartment building. Firelight flickered in glass decanters and gold-edged frames. He looked different here. No bodyguards, just him. The quiet dominance of someone entirely comfortable on his own territory. When he saw me, a faint smile curved his mouth. "Maya," he said simply, as if my name was a fact he'd owned forever. "You came." "I shouldn't have," I replied. "Ed, probably not." He poured a measure of amber liquid into 2 glasses, the ice clicking like tiny detonations. "Fear is healthy. I admire people who ignore it anyway." He handed me the drink. Our fingers brushed. Every nerve in me went rigid. "Why am I here?" I asked. Because I wanted to see if you could still look me in the eye, he said quietly. Most people break when danger smiles back at them. You didn't. My pulse quickened. You ruin people's lives. Emma owes you money, doesn't she? Tips gone wrong, bets, something. He studied me for a moment, amusement flickering. You believe what gossip builds for me. But tell me, would you rather know the truth? The truth? He leaned closer, voice molten and low. That bar, that debt, were never about her. His eyes caught mine, a storm trapped behind glass. They were about you. Thunder rattled the tall windows. The drink trembled in my hand. My breath caught somewhere between disbelief and the sharp electric scent of rain sneaking in through the open balcony doors. About me? I managed. I'd never met you before last night. Lorenzo's expression stayed maddeningly calm, a faint upturn at the corner of his mouth, like my confusion amused him. He rested his glass against the firelight, tracing the rim with one slow finger. You think I walk into the same back-alley bar twice a year by accident? His gaze flicked toward me. I knew your name before you threw that drink. You just surprised me by having aim. The fire popped. Somewhere far away, thunder pealed again, soft and rolling. If this is a threat, I said, forcing steel into my voice, say it outright. It's an offer, he corrected, standing. His height filled the space, shadows wrapping him like a tailored cloak. You don't belong behind that bar, Maya. You've kept your friend alive for months, paying her debt before she even asked for help. That kind of loyalty is rare. Dangerous, perhaps, but rare. My stomach twisted. You've been watching me? He gave a faint half-smile. Observing. There's a difference. You don't strike me as someone who likes being invisible, so I'll make this simple. He reached into his vest pocket and placed a small black metal key on the low glass table between us. Its surface caught the firelight, a glint of invitation and threat all at once. I have a vacancy. Personal assistant. Temporary if you wish. 6 months. Triple what you earn now, safety and debt consolidation included. You'll come to the estate each morning. You'll learn discretion. You'll leave when the time feels right. It sounded so reasonable, said in that low, velvet tone that I almost nodded. Then my common sense kicked in. You mean a pretty cage with benefits? Lorenzo chuckled softly. A cage is only a prison when the door locks from the outside. For a moment, neither of us spoke. The only sound was the soft hiss of rain and the crackle of burning oak. The air around us vibrated with something unnamed, something between warning and desire. He stepped closer, so near I could see the faint stubble along his jaw, could smell the smoke and citrus on his skin. You've already entered my world, Maya, whether you realize it or not. His thumb brushed against the edge of the key, sliding it toward me. The question is, do you want to keep stumbling and blind, or learn how to see the map? The flames danced across the glass cabinet, painting his face in gold and shadow. My pulse thudded in my ears as I stared at that small, gleaming key. Take it, he murmured. Come tomorrow, 8 sharp. I didn't touch the key, not yet, but I knew I would. The mansion looked different during daylight, less like danger, more like a museum pretending to be a home. Morning light poured through the high windows, catching suspended dust motes and turning them into glittering ghosts. I'd spent the night convincing myself not to return, then found my feet walking there anyway, driven by equal parts curiosity and fear. The black key felt heavy in my pocket. A housekeeper led me through hushed corridors that smelled faintly of lemon polish and cedar. She didn't ask questions, just gestured toward a heavy oak door. Behind it, a world of muted gray and silver opened. Lorenzo's private office. The expanse of glass overlooked the city's skyline, steel and smoke and early sun cutting through fog. He looked up from behind his desk, suit immaculate, coffee steaming beside an open ledger. You're early, he said. Most people hesitate longer. I almost did, I admitted. Changed my mind 12 times before the train hit Belmont. He smiled slightly. Good. Only fools make choices without uncertainty. The morning unfolded like an elaborate negotiation. I was shown systems, schedules, coded files, an assistant's desk by the window stocked with black notebooks, and a sleek computer that probably cost more than my apartment furniture combined. Lorenzo watched silently as I took notes, his gaze flicking between the screen and my hands, studying the rhythm of my writing. It was intimidating beyond reason. Around noon, his calm veneer cracked. Just slightly. A call came in, his voice dropping to Italian, sharp and cutting. He hung up and poured whiskey into his coffee instead of sugar. "Something wrong?" I asked before I could stop myself. "Rival business interests," he replied, voice flat. "Some people prefer chaos to order. And you prefer control." His gaze snapped to mine. "Always." There was a beat of silence, electricity humming underneath. "Is that going to be a problem, Miss Maya?" "Only if you mistake assistant for servant." The air tightened. Then, to my surprise, he laughed, a soft, incredulous sound. "There it is again," he said quietly. "That defiance." "It's called survival," I muttered. His smile curved, something unreadable flickering across his expression. "Keep it. It suits you." By afternoon, exhaustion hit like a wave. I hadn't realized how mentally draining it was to exist in his orbit, where every word felt like both a test and a threat. As I tidied the desk, my fingers brushed a framed photo half hidden by files. A little boy, curly-haired, laughing in sunlight. Beside him stood Lorenzo, younger, softer, his smile real. I looked up quickly. His eyes had changed, darker, distant. "Don't," he said quietly, tone razor-sharp but not cruel. Then more softly, "He's gone." The silence after that line felt sacred. That night, back in the guest suite he'd assigned me, I sat by the window watching the rain return. For the first time, the house didn't feel quite so cold. It felt like the eye of a storm, beautiful, calm, and waiting to break again. The days gathered speed, sliding into one another like the fall of cards in practiced hands. I learned Lorenzo's rhythm, the clipped precision of his mornings, the quiet danger of his evenings. I managed schedules, diffused tempers, memorized half-coded names that sounded more like operations than people. The household staff moved around me with polite silence, loyal to unseen rules. Yet beneath their composure, I felt it. Tension, old and threaded through marble floors. One gray afternoon, the storm finally showed its other face. Lorenzo had left for a meeting downtown. The house hummed with low-grade nerves until the moment the side gates clanged open. Tires screeched. I peered through the tall windows and saw 2 black sedans pull up, doors opening in unison. Men in matching coats stepped out, too polished, too synchronized. At their center walked a man whose presence felt like frost. He didn't wait to be invited. When he entered the foyer, rain on his shoulders, the air temperature seemed to drop a few degrees. Mid-40s, clean-cut, dressed in gunmetal gray, his eyes were the same shade, cold, calculating, familiar in a way that turned my stomach. "Giancarlo Moretti," the butler announced stiffly. "Unscheduled." Moretti, the rival last name I'd heard in every whispered meeting, the predator circling Lorenzo's empire. He looked straight at me, ignoring everyone else. "You must be the waitress who learned fast." His accent was smoother than Lorenzo's, his smile too rehearsed. "Tell him his uninvited guest stopped by to chat." "I'm not your messenger," I said before thinking. That earned me a flicker of interest. Brave or foolish. The guards shifted uneasily, aware that crossing Lorenzo's boundary carried invisible consequences. Still, Moretti stepped closer, lowering his voice. "Whatever he promised you, money, protection, purpose, it doesn't end well. Men let Kitaluka build truth the way sculptors build statues. They chip away until you look only at what they allow you to see." His gaze sharpened. "Ask him about the boy in the picture, then decide which cage you're standing in." He turned, coat trailing like smoke, and left as sharply as he had arrived. Tires hissed through puddles outside. The gate snapped shut behind him. The lingering chill in the hall didn't leave. When Lorenzo returned that night, his suit was splattered with rain, his expression thunderous. "He came here," he said, not asking, just knowing. I nodded. He knew about the photo. For the first time, Lorenzo's composure cracked wide open. The glass he held trembled slightly before he downed it. "Then he's desperate," he muttered, voice rough. "He wants what's buried." "I don't understand any of this," I said. He looked at me with something close to apology and something closer to fear. "You will," he murmured. "Soon. And when you do, promise me you'll run." The storm struck just after midnight, wind thrashing against the glass, thunder rattling the chandeliers. Lightning exposed the garden walls for an instant before plunging them back into darkness. I was in the study, sorting confidential files that smelled like old ink and gun oil, when every light in the house blinked out. The silence that followed wasn't peaceful. It was the kind soaked in intent. Then, somewhere downstairs, a door slammed. Footsteps. Too many. "Lorenzo?" My voice barely reached the corridor. No answer. I grabbed the nearest thing resembling a weapon, his heavy gold-bound ledger, and crept toward the main staircase. The storm howled through an open doorway where rain lashed the marble floor. 3 men in dark coats had forced their way inside, flashlights cutting through the black. In the brief flare of lightning, I caught the metallic glint of guns. "Maya!" Lorenzo's voice thundered from somewhere beyond the hall. I turned just as he emerged from the shadows, tie undone, electricity in his movements. His gun appeared from beneath his jacket as easily as breath. "Stay back!" he barked. The intruders shouted something in Italian, and then gunfire exploded, deafening, relentless. I hit the ground, the smell of burning powder filling the air. Shadows collided with light. Lorenzo moved like a strike of lightning himself. Precise, brutal, disciplined. One by one, the invaders fell. But not before a sharp cry escaped him. A cut along his arm, blood dark against white fabric. It ended as suddenly as it began. Smoke and silence lingered. The rain's hiss seeped back into the edges of hearing. My body trembled uncontrollably. Lorenzo lowered his weapon, face pale but steady. "Are you hurt?" he asked, crossing to me. I shook my head. "You're bleeding." "It's nothing." He winced, gripping the wound. "They were Moretti's men. He's done testing me. He's declared a war." I stared at the broken front door, at the slick of water spreading across stone. "He said you were hiding something. A boy." For a heartbeat, his entire frame went still. Then he said quietly, "My brother, Luca. They killed him in a crossfire 10 years ago. Moretti was responsible, though he calls it business. Everything I've built, the empire, the reputation, it's armor for that loss. And now he wants to strip it bare." The revelation hit with the weight of thunder. "You built a kingdom out of grief," I whispered. His eyes met mine, fierce and flickering like the fire behind him. "Maybe. But you walked into it and reminded me what it was to feel alive again." He took a step closer, rainwater dripping from his sleeve onto the polished floor. "I can protect you, but not forever. If you stay, you're a target too." Lightning flared one last time, painting the two of us in silver and fear. "Then teach me how to survive," I said, surprising us both. For the first time, Lorenzo's grim line of a mouth softened into something fragile, a tremor between defiance and awe. The rain finally slowed to a whisper by dawn. Pale light slid across the marble floor, catching pools of water and the faint scarlet trail Lorenzo had left behind. I found him in the conservatory, jacket discarded, shirt sleeves rolled up, tending his wound with shaky precision. The glass walls glowed with the gray of early morning, and for the first time I saw exhaustion written clean across his face. "You should have let the doctor handle it," I said softly, moving toward him. My voice trembled just enough to betray the night's weight. He looked up, that trademark confidence muted now. "I didn't want anyone else seeing how close they came." "They didn't," I murmured, pressing a linen cloth to his arm. The warmth of his skin radiated through the thin fabric, a pulse as frantic as mine. "They underestimated you. And you." His eyes flicked to my face. "You didn't run." "I wanted to," I admitted. "But then you said stay back. And I listened like it mattered." He winced as I wrapped his arm tighter, but his mouth curved into a faint smile. "You realize that's the first time anyone's ever defied me by obeying?" That earned a shaky laugh from me. "You're welcome." Silence settled between us, not awkward but heavy with everything unsaid, the chaos, the fear, the wild, unexpected tenderness that survived it all. Outside, the first hint of sun broke through the retreating storm clouds, painting the wet glass in streaks of gold. "I can't promise peace," he said quietly. "Not in my world." "I don't want peace," I replied. "I want truth." He turned fully toward me, his wounded arm forgotten. And if the truth is darker than you thought, then I'll be the one holding the light. The simple answer seemed to strike him deeper than any oath. He reached out with his good hand, tracing a strand of wet hair from my cheek. You should hate me, he whispered. I tried, said, and didn't move away. For a long moment, nothing existed but the sound of rain easing to silence, the faint hum of the city returning to life beyond the walls. Then Lorenzo leaned forward, his forehead resting against mine, both of us breathing in the fragile calm. I thought vengeance was all I had left, he said, voice rough with fatigue. But now you have to decide who you'll be without it, I finished for him. His lips brushed my temple, less a kiss, more a promise. Outside, the storm broke fully into sunlight, light spilling across the soaked garden like forgiveness. A week later, calm finally felt real, fragile, but real. The mansion no longer smelled of gunpowder and panic. Fresh paint covered the chipped plaster near the entryway, and the sound of hammering had been replaced by birdsong drifting through open windows. The city stretched beyond the hills, sunlight washing the skyline in soft gold. It was the first morning Lorenzo and I both allowed silence to exist without suspicion. I'd started taking walks through the East Garden after breakfast, where dew clung to roses and the air tasted faintly of damp earth. The gravel path still bore faint boot prints from that night, a subtle reminder of how easily life reroutes itself. I followed them each morning anyway, tracing change like a ritual. Lorenzo joined me now, his arm still bandaged but healing. He didn't move with the same threatening precision anymore, his pace slowed, almost uncertain. For once, he looked like a man learning how to breathe instead of command. I've been thinking about your question, he said, eyes on the horizon. What question? The one you didn't mean to ask. What happens after vengeance? I smiled faintly. Find something to build instead of destroy? He nodded. Maybe forgiveness isn't a single act. Maybe it's a discipline. We paused near the fountain. The sunlight bounced off its rippling surface, scattering shards of waterlight across the marble. You sound almost philosophical, I teased. I spent years mastering fear. I suppose learning grace is overdue. Starting with yourself, I said. His gaze met mine, softer than I'd ever seen it. Starting with you forgiving me. I already did, I admitted quietly. The moment you risked everything to save me, I realized the man people fear isn't the one you fight to be each day. He's just the armor you outgrew. He breathed out slowly, as if releasing something he'd carried for a decade. You make ruin sound like redemption, Maya. Sometimes they're the same thing, just seen in a different light. The breeze shifted through the roses, cool and clean, carrying away the trace of smoke that had lingered here for years. I looked up at the sun breaking free of the clouds, its warmth touching the scar just visible beneath the edge of his sleeve. The mark would fade, but not disappear. Neither would mine, the invisible one branded inside by everything we'd survived. When we walked back toward the house, the marble glowed honey-white under the spreading light. For the first time, the DeLuca estate didn't feel like a fortress. It felt like a home still learning how to exhale. I had thought I'd entered a cage the day I accepted that key. Instead, I'd found the lock within myself and learned how to turn it. Months later, autumn drifted across Chicago like an apology written in gold. Leaves scattered along the drive, crackling beneath the tires of black sedans now used for ordinary business, not escape routes. The gray-green edges of the lake shimmered under the morning sun. The city that had once felt hostile now looked like possibility. Inside the estate, laughter replaced the echoes that used to haunt the halls. Staff spoke freely. The music drifting from the parlor was something light, old jazz, the kind Lorenzo claimed his brother once loved. I'd taken over half the study, its oak shelves now lined with ledgers beside my favorite paperbacks. My desk faced his, sunlight spilling evenly across both. Balance. On our first quiet Sunday together, Lorenzo leaned back in his chair, reading some market report I'd annotated. His tie was gone, sleeves rolled, a faint trace of stubble softening that once impenetrable jaw. I still marveled at the difference, the way his voice had lost its chill, replaced by warmth that reached the corners of his eyes. He set the paper aside and crossed the space between us. You changed the route of my shipping fleet. he said, feigning severity. You asked me to save you 10%, I replied, fighting a grin. I saved you 15. A laugh escaped him, low, barely there, but genuine. I should have known you'd outperform an order. You hired me for defiance, remember? I kept you for it, he admitted. And just like that, the air between us softened. I could still smell the faint mix of his cologne, cedar, and smoke, but now it carried comfort, not peril. His hand brushed mine as he reached for the dossier, fingers lingering one heartbeat longer than necessary. Outside, a breeze rattled the glass panes, lifting fallen leaves like sparks of copper light. You ever think about that night? I asked quietly. He didn't have to ask which one. Every time it rains, he said. You threw a drink, and the whole course of my life spilled with it. I smiled, shaking my head. You promised me chaos. No, he corrected gently. I promised attention. You turned it into change. He tipped his glass of water, as if saluting that memory between us, then raised an eyebrow. You still owe me a whiskey, by the way. The laugh that rose from me felt easy, free of fear. Add it to my paycheck deductions. He leaned in, pressed a brief kiss to my forehead, and murmured, Keep your wages. Just keep staying. The light through the window caught us both, gilding every shadow. Rain might come again tomorrow. It always does. But it no longer meant danger. It meant renewal. Final quote. Sometimes the storm doesn't destroy you. It teaches you who's willing to stand in the rain with you. Thank you for listening to this story. Please like, subscribe, and share for more love stories that you have never heard before.